Okay, people. So I have with me today Perry Blackshear. Is it Perry Blackshear? Is that
Yes.
ah
Hello.
splendid? Boom. Finally pronounced something correctly, people. And Perry is the writer and director of Can I Consume You? Sorry, When I Consume You. Um, which is Yo, Perry, man, like I did not expect what I watched in this film. It was it was really interesting and just compelling. And there's so many things I need to ask you about this because the performances you were able to get out of, what I mean, your cast was just phenomenal.
Oh,
Phenomenal.
thanks,
And the
man.
story goes in play. I wasn't expecting that first little thing to take place. That boom took me like, yo, wait, what's happening now? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So how the hell did this come about, right? Where did because people say write what you know. Now, if you know this, I'm like, yo, what's your life like, man?
No, I'm very I mean, no, my life is not as dark as these characters' lives, thankfully. Um, I think it started I was learning about at one point that loneliness fires the same like pain receptors as physical pain. So, and that felt very real to my experience, like during like dark times, really hard times, you feel kind of bludgeoned. So I think it began wanting to make a movie about loneliness that felt very physical. Um, and then from there, I think it sort of I love this idea of the brother sister duo and the really being true to these characters and telling their story, which is I've had people that I really love in my life that have been through some pretty hard things. Maybe it's hitting your late 30s, but you know these people your whole life, and then only now sometimes I feel like these incredible stories are coming out and you're like, I did not know that you went through all that. Like,
Mm,
and so I think, just telling a true story, being true to these two characters, and telling a story about like growing up again. Like
yes.
you grow up one way and you can't help how you grow up because like, you have your parents and your whatever, but then like when you're older, sometimes you go through like a second growing up that you kind of decide to be a certain way. But it's so hard because
Mm,
you're like built one way and you try to change. So it's, about like, when the world is monstrous, do you become a monster in response? And what happens if you try to do that? Do you lose your soul along the way?
yeah. Yeah, there's like it just feels like this is touching upon so many different kind of things, right? And I think the film coming out now, like I feel that a load of people can resonate with it, right? Because the way the pandemic hit so many people, and I think hit them in ways they would never have expected. And so I think it gives people a different perspective on the like if people would watch this film in good times. You know what I mean? Never gone through stuff. Like some people might think, oh man, why would no one would do that? And like, how could someone let everything get on top of them? Like, you know what I mean? But I
Yeah.
think once you've experienced stuff, or maybe seen someone go through stuff, it kind of just knocks the cobwebs from the eyes, and you see the world in a completely different light. So I think this is a great time for this, you know what I mean, to drop and for people to be able to connect with it, you know?
Yeah, well, thanks. It's I keep talking like I'm an expert on all this stuff. I think it was mostly I told someone that it's like trying to transcribe nightmares that I've had and like make a movie out of them. So it's sometimes it's not intellectual. I'm more just like kind of just coming from your id or whatever. Um, but yeah, I agree, and I think that it's possible that at least what I went through and a lot of my loved ones went through during the pandemic. A lot of this loneliness and sort of feeling helpless was always there, but like you saw your buddies sometimes and
Yeah.
and you kind of there was some escapes to it, and now you're just, like when everything locked down and everything, it all the stuff that was there kind of came out more. Like you couldn't hide from it as much. Maybe something like that.
Oh, no, for sure. And like, because you think about the things that you place in your life to mitigate other things, right? So you might like think, I live alone. I hate spending a load of time. All right, I'm going to join the local gym. Okay,
Hmm.
I'm going to join a film club. I'm going to join a book group. I'm going to, a knitting circle. There's all these things that you'll put there so you don't actually have to spend too much time on your own. You work late in the office,
Yep.
right? You take extra shifts. There's all these things that you might do. You
Yeah.
know, people in like you see people in bad relationships, and it's just like, oh, I'll stay out for another drink, and you're like, oh, don't you need to get home and see her? Oh no, she'll be fine. I'll be yeah, I'll do one more. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I'll come to that gig with you, and you're like, are you sure?
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, right? And it's just these
Yeah.
things that we put there so you don't have to experience something or face things. You know,
Hmm.
once all those things have been removed, you have to take a look and kind of evaluate, who am I? Where do I want to be? Right? How do I
Yeah.
cope with this?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's funny because the movie feels like it was made for the pandemic, but it was made before the pandemic. We shot it before the pandemic. It was edited during the pandemic though, so maybe some of that came out in the sound design and editing and things like that. But definitely, it's like when all the distractions go away. Um, a lot of my friends got together during the pandemic and like got married, so,
Mhm.
or broke up. Like
Yeah.
it was sort of one thing or the other. I don't know if that happened to you or people that you knew, but it was like it was either forever or it was done because this is a lot. Like this is very intense being in the same house like this with someone.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh man, like yeah, the amount of people that just connected because it was just like, oh, we realized that we don't want to be alone and we need this support system.
Hmm.
We're cool, like we've been friends for ages, so why don't we do something? Or it's just like, I I hate the way you click your fucking fingers. I cannot do it one more
Yeah.
time. Like
Yeah.
we've had enough. It's done.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
kind of it's kind of crazy when you see all of these things. But I think even though you created this before the pandemic, right? I think there's just these universal truths, right? There's this kind of infrastructure to reality and society that we don't always want to take a look at, but there's certain things that make you take that hard look. And
Hmm.
like a film like this helps hold up that mirror sometimes to people and be like, I understand that situation, and when you couch it in this different way of possession and all these other things, it's a little bit more palpable, right, to people because
Yeah.
they don't actually want to see like an actual couple imploding because it feels a little itchy. It's just like, oh, home, man. Oh,
Yeah.
damn. But watching
Yeah.
it like this, you can be like, oh, I relate to that. But no, that's nothing. Obviously, I'm not possessed, so no, that's not
Yeah. Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's
That
like, oh, sorry, man.
Oh no, it reminds me someone was saying about writing that they were like, you know how you look at medical diagrams of the human body and it's like really bright colors and it's like unrealistic, but it helps you understand what's going on.
Mm,
It's like movies are like or like when you use genre stuff, it like makes it less realistic, but like you can see it better somehow. Like it makes more sense because you've exaggerated some parts and stuff like that.
yes.
Uh, Something like that.
Yeah. Now, one thing I really enjoyed was the camera work on this. Now, like, because this is your third feature. You've done some shorts, but this is your third feature, Perry, right? Like, where does this relationship with the camera come from? And understanding these angles and perspectives and the things that can really make a story pop that little bit more?
Yeah, well, glad you mentioned that. So it's I mean, it was a real challenge. The way we shoot these films, it's exciting to get to, prepare for some larger features now, but these films we shoot sort of like a documentary. So it's just the actors and I out on the streets, and I have to pull my own focus, which is a disaster a lot of the time. But we thinking about it like a documentary. We didn't we do it for very little money, and we have to do it pretty fast. And I always love really focusing on the performance above everything. So the camera mostly sort of is in service of the performance and the actors. And to help that, I just went and I searched everywhere in my neighborhood for cool looking places. Um, some of which don't exist anymore because they've been built up. Actually, some of the places like you see don't exist because of the pandemic. But
Mhm.
um, specifically the camera work and the framing and the way it's shot. I think what I love camera work and sound work that puts us in a different mind state, like feeling like we're experiencing reality from someone else's eyes through someone else's eyes.
Mm.
So Requiem for a Dream had a huge impact on me when it came out because I was a young teenager and I had never done hard drugs like that. But I had gotten really, really sick, like throwing up all night for many, many days. And I just remember this feeling of like nothing is real. It's all a, you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
watching that movie gave me the same feeling of
yeah,
that. And so I think I just tried to replicate the experience of these people that, Wilson is kind of is obsessive and has like a lot of anxiety. And so to try to make it feel like what he feels like, and using the camera to do that, and sometimes using the camera for Daphne to make it feels like what she feels like as well. um I love stuff like that. And it was a challenge, but I think it was exciting to it was yeah, we had sort of set out with that goal in mind.
No, you really did a great job of just giving this human element of the piece, right? They're giving that connective tissue. So it's even though, you know what I mean, there's some crazy shit that you'd be like, yo, no one's gone through that. But you can kind of get into the mindset of these characters because of the way you shot it. Like you did, because the thing I hate when people use music to kind of make you go, okay, now you feel happy. Now this is
Hmm.
a sad scene. And I'm just like,
Hmm.
yo, you should get those emotions just from what you're seeing or hearing. You
Yeah.
shouldn't use music to tell you this. You should be able to see it. Now, you can have music, but it should be an accompaniment. It shouldn't be a bludgeon. And so your scenes give you these emotions just through what you're seeing and hearing. And it's so powerful, man. Like it's so, man. Yeah, this film, I honestly had no clue what the hell I was coming into. And what I got was just, it was something else. Like I hate
Thanks, man.
Wilson pissed me off. I ain't gonna say Wilson pissed me the fuck off, man. But, but I then still understood where he was coming from. You
Yeah.
know, because I think it's just like the thing with Wilson is you have this person that was kind of coddled in a way, like protected
Yeah.
from everything.
Yeah.
And so he's just a little weak, right? He's a little bit just too, and you're just
Yeah.
like, Jesus Christ, son, you do something to help.
Yeah.
And then you also get that whole when when people are like, I'm gonna make a change, but then
Yeah.
they really put the effort in to make the change. And
Yeah.
so like you see that, but you're just like, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that person. And I think
Yeah.
that's what you get with Wilson. You get that frustration because you'd be like, I would never want to be that. I hope
Yeah.
I'm that.
Yeah.
But you have the empathy because you understand what made him that way, what got him there, and how he's trying to change it. But
Yeah.
it's like, but to get the like You know what I mean? Because you can watch something and you can be like, that character's stupid.
Yeah.
But to actually have these things resonate and you get so frustrated and you're like, hold on, it's a film. Why am I so frustrated at this character? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This isn't someone I know. You know, so that just like, yeah, it really brought out these emotions, man.
Yeah, well, thanks. I admit that I felt the same way about Wilson a little bit, only in that I think that, and I don't know if this is well, a male thing or not, but I think that there was a time in my life when I was in my 20s where, I was a filmmaker, artist kind of guy, and I, you know, cared about people and was kind of nice and stuff, and then was confronted with situations where nice didn't work, or being like friendly and kind of, and so I sort of went through a phase where it's like, all right, well, time to fucking hit back now, you know what I mean? And I got into it. I was like, okay, this is how it works. If some, you just have to be an asshole basically. And like my friends at the time were like, okay, so I'm glad that you're working on stuff and changing a little bit, but like this sucks. You suck now. And so, I think I went through like a light version of this where like you want to become different, but maybe you go too far, or maybe you lose yourself along the way somewhere where like you want to become different than how you are without like the being soft enough to be able to love and have empathy, but hard enough to fight and stand up for yourself, and like where that line is. um it could be a male thing, it could be a me thing, I don't know, but that that journey of like figuring out what to do, how to be an adult kind of, and being able to hold those two things together is a part of what the film's about. Yeah, and definitely Wilson, poor guy, you just want to kind of shake him and be like, come on, get it together. But then when he does, you're like, not like that.
Yeah.
Not like that. Yeah.
Because it's crazy because it's just like then he stops listening
Yeah.
and he's getting given information and it's just like no, and then it all goes, you know what I mean,
Yep.
in a certain way, and you're just like,
Yeah.
oh, God.
Totally. Totally. Yep. Know exactly what you mean.
Mm, now, do you storyboard? Because it's just like I get, checking out the cool areas and all of this kind of thing, but
Hmm.
still, like, just creating these shots, these sequences, it's just like, you just figure, like, how do you kind of figure that's the one that's going to work, right?
Hmm.
Then you look at these scenes and you think, oh, there's different ways you could tell this, but
Hmm.
the way you chose to tell it, you're like, oh, this works so well. But it's just like, how do you kind of get to that point? Do you shoot it in multiple ways and then work out which is the one? Do you screen,
Hmm.
what I mean, draw it all out? Like, what's the process, Perry?
So I used to storyboard, but I found for myself that it ended up feeling like a comic strip or something, like a little bit boxed, where it was almost more like the camera was leading the movie, and the camera was making the actors do things.
Mm-hmm.
But I know a lot of people that storyboard and it works awesome. So something about the way my brain works didn't do it as well. So what I do is I shot list. So I have a good idea of, I spend some time building the scene as a shot, but it's a little vaguer, like, oh, a close up and a close up, or, like a point of view shot and a, close up of hands or activities.
Mm.
Um, and then I have a pretty good sense of how I want them to go. But I also used to work as an editor, so it feels good to have a little bit of freedom in the edit, because your best laid plan, sometimes a shot you spend days thinking about and preparing ends up falling flat. And sometimes one of my old colleagues at NYU, Christina Nikolova, in our grad school, was like an old school Bulgarian cinematographer, and she, the director would go be doing something, and she would grab the camera and go shoot anything, like the wind in the trees, or just like something else. She was just always like hunting for cool things, and so I usually try to give enough time and space to hunt for things or discover things as we're shooting.
Okay, okay. Now, I think one interesting thing you said there, like you used to be an editor, right?
Hmm.
I've spoken to a few editors that then kind of move on to direction,
Hmm.
and I feel that it does give a different perspective, like this different understanding to the flow of a piece, right? Because I feel that you've worked in that different process, having to kind of make things work and cut them together and change things around. So yeah,
Hmm.
you think that's a kind of it's giving you that extra tool, knowing that and understanding that process.
Yeah, I think I joke that I'm learned more about screenwriting in editing my first feature than in anything else, because you shoot it and then you're like, oh, we don't need that scene, or we don't need that dialogue, or something like that. So I think it also is helpful as a producer, because you're like, okay, I only have this, but I can cut around this and make it work. So there's a lot of practical. It's very helpful practically, especially with things like fight scenes, to more technical scenes. Sometimes I think I I use it as a crutch, because I'm like, oh, I'll just edit my way out of that. And
Right.
so I spend 10 hours doing something in edit that I could have spent 30 minutes doing when I was shooting. So, you keep learning with all this stuff. And I think that, um, the next, we're thinking about doing a fourth one, and I'm building in some like oneer scenes with no editing, just to see
Right.
what it'll be like. Just experiment with different ways of doing something. So, with each of these, you're testing a bunch of things out and learning as you go.
Hmm. Like, do you like to experiment when you make something? You know what I mean? Try something new, like an idea that you saw somewhere else, or just like maybe this might work.
Yeah, definitely the scene that and you usually get some wins and some, some things you would do differently next time. Um, the scene you're referring, that happens about 20 minutes into the movie, that was very pre-planned. When I wrote the screenplay, I imagined it exactly like that. And that was based off like trying to replicate. I don't know if this ever happened to you, but when I've been in car crashes or things that were like very intense, the world gets very weird. Like, it becomes kind of flat looking and sort of unreal and hyper real, and it doesn't
Yeah.
feel like you living it, kind of like you just, and I'm not smart enough to know if that's dissociation or whatever, but I tried to like make it feel like that, and I wrote it like that and tried to replicate that. So that I think, um I was really happy with that one. And then there's other things. Well, I don't know how much I should talk about all the things I wish I could do differently, but um, another one was the fight scenes. I'd never really done fight scenes like that, and I thought that would be exciting to experiment with that. And we worked with a guy who actually. This is sort of a funny story. The guy that helped us out initially when we were building the fights, we had a guy train the two actors in LA, on the fights, and then we also had someone on set.
Okay.
But when we were figuring out what would happen, I worked with one of the friends of one of the actors who is an MMA fighter and like a national Muay Thai guy.
Right. Right.
And so there's video of us practicing, and he's like 6'2" and has like 60 pounds on me. And he's also never done stunts before. He's only actually hurt people. So like when I was
Right.
practicing with him, like the videos of us, I'm like don't in retrospect, it was not a good idea. He could have broken my neck probably. um so that stuff. And also, the A7 is a remarkable camera by Sony. It's a pretty cheap camera. It's a pretty, for film, it's more like a prosumer camera, but its ability to capture light is so remarkable. And I just always thought, I want to shoot a movie at night in New York using this remarkable camera that can make the nighttime look so bright and beautiful. So yeah, you experiment with things, and then you win some, you lose some, and you try to learn from your mistakes and get excited about the next one.
Okay. No, that's Yeah, it's interesting, man. Because I mean, having these sort of conversations, right? No one does things exactly the same. So it's always intriguing to find out, like, how did you get that shot? Like, what's the perspective on this? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's intriguing.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
now, one thing is, like, because the stars of the film, they're also producing the film with you. How, like, why and how does that work?
Well, partly because it's awesome in the sense that, like, I don't know if you've ever been in a band. I was in a few bands, and it's just so great. I mean, you get there, you're all playing music together. It's this collective experience. You get to work with these people you love, and you're all making it together, and it feels like nothing else on earth. Because they're my really good friends, and Libby became such an amazing colleague. So you have, you finish shooting, but then you get to like finish the day by having all these creative discussions, and then it's an amazing thing, and I recommend it. It's also so difficult because you know everybody has really close relationships. So and it's just you all. So it's sort of like hiking out into the wilderness. So if something breaks, you don't have anybody to deal with it except you. So you have to kind of deal with it. So one night we were supposed to shoot this big scene outside, and then it was pouring with rain. It was like 33 degrees. And so we were like, what do we do? And we looked around and we were just like, well, I guess we need to figure this out because there's no one else that's going to figure this out. And we can't like build a set to. So I just scouted and I found a bridge and we shot under the bridge. Um, so it's a lot of problem solving. I think sometimes it is difficult to take. We used to have hats, actually. We had a producer hat that we literally took off so that we could immerse ourselves in the movie.
Right, right.
Um, and I think that there's a lot to be said about having separation where you have a separate editor or a separate, I love shooting my own work, but it's also a huge challenge.
Mm,
So I think there's good and bad things about it. It's a little bit like, having being in a band and you producing your own record as well. Like it's so intimate and you can do so much. Um, but also, you miss out on the expertise of someone whose only job that is. So um, it's a really cool way to work. I was inspired by also another NYU colleague, old buddy Chloe Zhao, uh, did her first feature with a crew of 5, and that intimacy that you get from that, an ability to turn on a dime and focus really on what we care about, which is directing performance, uh, is wonderful. It also comes with a huge cost of it being really, everything you kind of have to figure it out yourself. Uh, and we're getting better about bringing in other people when we need to, like, the fight, like people helping us with the fight stuff and things like that. And it's cool to meet other people too as we like expand our team and branch out. So it's not for everybody, but it is a cool way to work among many, many cool ways to work to make a movie.
mm. No, I think that makes a lot of sense because I think the thing that always is hard to fathom when it comes to producers and executive producers and things like that because there's people that actually contribute and
Hmm.
people where it's just an add-on for extra credits and things like that. And it's like, so sometimes when you see this huge list, it's like, how many did you actually got involved and what did they bring to it? You know what I mean? It's one of those odd things. So it's always interesting to know when people are actually, boots on the ground, like actually, you know what I mean, getting their hands dirty and working this stuff out.
Yeah, and definitely just a shout out to the actors and producers. They're all great producers. They would shoot a scene and then they'd go start making blood and preparing for the next scene or doing sound. I mean, they were really, and they've gone on. I mean, Libby after this went and directed a web series, and I think she's up. Like after working with us, she's like, I could do this. Like, she's like, so no, definitely. There's a lot of getting, they really get their hands dirty and we all make it together in that way. Yeah.
Nice. And how did like with the casting for this, how
Hmm.
easy was it to kind of find the, people for these roles?
Well, the lead, Evan Dumichel, I've worked with 3 times, and he's an old buddy from college, and we've been making films forever. So I sort of wrote the character for him. And then same with McLeod Andrews. We've worked in all of our films together. And I've worked with Margaret Ying Drake a bunch too, and she's wonderful. But it called for a sister character, and Margaret's half white and half Chinese, so it wouldn't have worked. So we were on the hunt for a actress, and we mostly went through friends first. We figured we would do that first, friends of friends and people that we knew that were actors. And Libby had worked with Evan a few times, and I was just so blown away by her abilities and also just what she brought to the whole project. She was just so ready to make stuff. Um, and then she and Evan rehearsed out in LA. And there was also a kind of like the way we like to work is take the subject matter really seriously, but once it's done, like I think there's this myth that I was taught when I was younger that's like being a movie, to make art, it has to suck. Like,
Yeah.
like making a movie, you have to suffer for it to be good. And I was like, oh yeah, yeah, we're just gonna like, yeah. It was like when I was reading Nietzsche or whatever. I don't know. I was 19. Um, so I think that I don't feel like that anymore. And maybe it's because I'm getting older, but also I've met people like Mike Flanagan, who's sort of a mentor, and his sets are awesome. And like I was on a set with him, shadowing him, and like other random celebrities would just appear, having flown down. And it's like, I was in the area. Can I like be here and like, can I be a part? And he's like, no, your management would never let me just like give you a role. And they're like, come on. And like, it's just a place you want to be.
Mm,
That matters a lot to me because the world there's enough suffering out there, and like life's hard enough for sets to be terrible places. So, um, we work really hard, but then we also make sure to, have it be a good time. And the other part of that is that Libby was just so great. Like the characters in the film really had a messed up childhood, and we wanted to really do it right and not. There's a lot of bad versions of stories about this that are exploitative or like kind of, and so we read all these books on trauma and like really did a lot of research on how the stuff that happens in childhood can manifest later physically, and the things that people do and the ways people cope. And you take it really seriously, but then and now Libby just feels like part of the family, basically. I mean, it feels like she's always been, that I don't know if you watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but what season was that? 5, where it was like she had a sister the whole time. It was like retconned
yeah,
magically.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like now Libby is like retconned into all of our films. It's like
yeah.
it feels like she's always been part of the team. She's fantastic. Yeah.
Ah, man, yeah, it's funny because what I mean. I know what you mean when people will be like, "Oh, it's gotta suck. You gotta feel it." And so many times you hear about those set. I think there was a tank film, and I forget
Hmm.
which actor it was. I think it was the dude that was in Honey Boy. I forget the name.
Hmm.
But it was just like he didn't wash and he was like shouting at people and he never got out of character. And you'd be like,
Hmm.
I get that you want to try and get what this is, but if you piss off the people you're working with, it'll make
Yeah.
it hard to shoot a really great film because they're just
Yeah.
gonna be so frustrated with you. And it's
Yep.
always interesting when you see certain films, right? Like a lot of Adam Sandler films or Paul Feig and Josh Whedon and people like that. You see they're working with the same people over and over again, and you
Yeah.
just get this sense that this must be such a great time.
Yep. Yeah.
So
And I
yeah.
loved P.T. Anderson when I was in college too, for the same reason, where he sort of felt like he had a repertoire company a little bit.
Mm.
And my dream was Bergman, actually. He just learning about him and how he just has his 8 buddies come to like some summer house and make a movie every summer in Sweden. I was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard in my life. Maybe 12 people, but like you can tell that he's friends with. I saw some behind the scenes footage, and they just all drink afterwards. You know what I mean? Like what a great situation. And I mean, look, larger professional sets, because I used to work at a in a tech company and had to do commercials for Google and things like this, and I've been on bigger sets, and there's a magic to that too. I mean, what an amazing, like, being on an airplane. It's like,
Yeah,
wow, this amazing, powerful machine, and you can move mountains like that. I mean, it's really spectacular. So there's definitely so many ways to do this. But I think the thinking that it has to suck, I'm sure some people can pull that off, but I guess that's just not for me. You know what I mean?
yeah, no, definitely, definitely. So Libby and Evan rehearsed.
Hmm.
Was that through direction from you? Like, how does that work? Do you give them, is it you give them the full script? Like, do you give them notes? Like, listen, in these scenes when they're doing this, I really am looking for these emotions to kind of come
Hmm.
through, or this, can we, you know, just imagine that you've gone through this. Like, what's the kind of framework for this kind of thing?
Yeah, yeah. So for the way we work pretty conventionally in that way, it's sort of more like it's a little bit like the actors, they get the full script, and a little bit like a play, they go through the lines, and they get sort of a basic comfort with the scene, and they'll usually, because they're awesome, will come up with the first pass at like the wants and the needs of the characters in the scene. um, and then once they kind of get used to the dialogue, they don't have to be totally off book, but just so that they get kind of they get a sense for it.
Yeah.
Then I talked with them about their characters a bunch. I gave them a few things to read, uh, and we some of it was a conversation, like Daphne's jacket, for example. I guess this isn't directing, but this is sort of character building. Um, we were like, what would Daphne wear and what would look cool? And that's actually a Norwegian um, fighter jacket from World War II.
Ah.
Uh, and so things like this, and like, where does that come from, and sort of building a character together a little bit based off the script. And then once we get a little closer, either online, I'll go, they'll perform the scene, and then I'll give them direction. Um, and it's more like making sure that the kind of simple through line is maintained. I'm trying to think of a good example of this. Um, uh, making sure the characters know what they're trying to do in the scene,
Yeah,
so that
yeah.
they're not just saying the lines like they're supposed to or hitting their marks. But so for example, if we're running a scene and Evan is like, I'm just like sitting here, but like I just want to leave. Like she's insulting me. I just want to leave the room. Why am I sitting here? Then we can like rewrite the scene or change some things, or we can give better direction to sort of figure it out, so that things don't feel stagey. And but then they usually hold. Well, it depends. And then once we get on set, it changes again, because you're in a real space, and we figure out like the physical space of it all, so it doesn't feel like you're just performing a stage play in a black box, but that it's a real tangible world that you're dealing with. Um, so that's the basic process. Yeah,
Like I really loved. There's a scene outside, right there. I think it's in a car park,
yeah,
parking lot, and like Daphne's just like, "You're weak, you're pathetic. I've always looked
hmm,
after you," and then he's just like, "Fuck you." She's
yeah,
like, "That's what I wanted," and
yeah,
you just like, "Oh fuck," right? Oh shit.
yeah,
Yeah, oh man, yeah, I feel that. I feel that. That was just like such a great scene. Like,
yeah,
and that's the thing. It's just I kind of feel that this doesn't work if these actors don't nail everything. You know what I mean? Because you
yep,
have to buy this connection between this brother and sister, this
hmm,
love between this brother and sister, but then the frustration and the fear and just all of it. You have to buy it. It's got to be there.
yep,
And then as Wilson gets a little bit carried away from it, like, but you've got to buy it, and
yep,
you really buy it. They really just give you that, and I think it's crazy, especially like when you look at like Daphne and
Hmm.
friggin' Dave, like um ugh uh I'm gone blank on the name. David Castillo.
Oh yeah, yeah, the detective, yeah.
Um yes, it's just like there's the characters all over the place at first, jumping around and being like, "Rah, rah, rah," and these kind of sharp twists,
Yeah.
right? Pivots that have to happen at times, but
Yeah.
it's so on point, right?
Oh,
And
thanks, man.
but it's just like you're watching, it's like, how the fuck do you get someone to be able to do that? Right? Like what goes into it to get that sort of performance? Are you doing like how many cuts are you like shots are you going through? Is it
Mm.
first
Yeah,
cut,
yeah.
second? Like, is it like a full rehearsal all the way through? Like, yeah, let me know how you get these performances, man.
Yeah, well, the first answer is casting. Only, that's the joke. There's like I was teaching some directing class at one point, and it was like, I should just scrap this whole thing and have it be one class, which is cast well, and then you're good. But I think that long scene with McLeod Andrews on the bench, they did rehearse that like a play, so that was all. And we broke it up to sort of have different sections so that we didn't shoot the whole thing. But I think there are some takes that are shot the whole way through, basically. Um, and you don't want to do that the whole film because it can just be so exhausting. But it's nice to have sections where, when you open it up like that, things go sometimes slightly different directions than you expect, and to let them. And then sometimes you get awesome, like the earlier scene where McLeod, as David, is confronting Evan on the street,
Yeah.
and Evan knocks him down. Then he's like, being all crazy. Um, we used about, I did about 4 takes from one angle and 2 takes from another angle, and the 2 takes from the other angle were sort of backup. But the last take of the second angle was so good because McLeod knew that he was free, like he had already done it, so now
Mm,
he could just um and Mike Flanagan does that too, where he basically he does however many takes he needs, which is usually about 3, and then he tells the actors like, okay, I'm good, so do as many as you want now. And the actors, because they're respectful, won't take 20 takes, but
yeah.
they'll do a few where they get to really be present in the scene and focus, and not, and sort of just start, do something for. And so it's like not improv, but it's getting what you need and then letting the actor have their take on it. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, and sometimes things are batshit crazy and you can't use them just because of other situations, but you try to create like little arenas where they can mess around. So like, you kind of give them the boundaries of it and then kind of let them see what they can do, and sometimes you get really really cool stuff that way.
Mm, okay, that makes sense. Interesting. Now, with the music, there's the score is great. The score really helps set that tone of the film, that kind of, that darkness, but still that hope and the,
Hmm.
all of that kind of thing. So, how does that happen? Like, how do you kind of work with the composer to create something like this? Or do you just leave it fully up to them to just kind of bring something to the table?
Yeah, for me, I try to get it so that the film is able to hold up without music first, because I've had experiences where the music is so good or like overwhelms the scene you can't really tell what's going on. So we did that, and then we used temp. So just whenever I watch a movie and I love a piece, I'll be like, oh yeah, and then I try to remember it and look it up later. So I have a kind of library of pieces that I move around, and I knew that I wanted it to be a little bit orchestral, kind of like, because it feels to me sometimes like like a mini. This sounds so pretentious. How can I say this in a not pretentious way? Like, like a like a kind of little mini myth or something. Like it's like a little tiny opera or something. Like this big story of this young man and his sister falling from grace, and um, so we wanted there to be a little bit of orchestral stuff. The two guiding lights we had is I wanted it to feel to use make the music for it to feel a little bigger than the world because the world is so claustrophobic and intimate. Um, and then also to use score to make us feel like what Wilson was feeling. So that kind of overwhelm and just like sort of sonic assault to kind of really keep you destabilized a little bit like him and not knowing what was coming or where it was coming from. Um, and then it's just a lot of experimentation. I remember with They Look Like People, the first film, there's that opening scene where the young woman is in bed with no face. Her face is just in darkness. And I was working at a company at a time in an edit bay, and I would work nights. After I finished work, I would just stay editing, and I worked on that scene and just played with all the different, like the ticking clocks come in or this coming out, and then I would share them with my coworkers. I'd be like, just come in, what do you think of this, and just play it, and they'd either be like, oh, or they'd be like, oh, I don't like what's going on, and so you just mess around and try your best to try to make things work like that. Yeah, a lot of experimenting.
Okay, interesting. And have you always done like, do you kind of do this for all your films? Is this like the approach, or are you trying different kind of things to try and get those scores in those different places, or to tell a different kind of story?
hmm I think the first film I set out as a goal with no music, and that was like a challenge. The second film I fell in love with this choir called Kitka. There was this ensemble that sang folk music. And there was a story about a Rusalka in a lake, and it was Slavic, and it was perfect. So I was like, okay, I'm going to base the whole movie around this score. And for this third one, it was a little bit more piecemeal. I think I'd sort of for the next one like to lean into music, and I'd love to get a composer beforehand to like work even with the script stage and kind of get, because I know some people do that.
Mm.
Um, so it's sort of finding a good balance or finding what works. I also used to write a bunch of music, so there's a dream of doing some sort of ghost musical at one point.
Mm.
Uh, sort of sort of in the works as well. That may
Okay.
be a that may be a that may be one. That's like the seventh movie, who knows? We'll see.
Ah, interesting, man.
Yeah.
Okay. So, once you shot all those shots, everything got done, you're in the editorial, like, what was the thinking? As you're trying to put this together, did it kind of feel like, did you get something at the end which was a little bit different to what you envisioned going in?
I think I don't think I realized how dark it felt when we were writing the script. Um, I think part of it was that we were trying to be true to the experience of the characters, and by like being inside their heads, it just got really dark. Um, I think it became more personal than we expected, not because, you know, a lot of the crew and the people and I had experience, loved ones that went, you know, people that we've known that have committed suicide, and um, it all this other stuff sort of ended up being in the story because we made it in such an intimate way. Um, so I think it got more, yeah, like darker than we anticipated when we went out to make it. Um, I think that was the. Let's see. Is there any other takeaway? And it's funny because I guess these things sound contradictory, but they're not. It both got bleaker, and also there was a lot like, I think initially I imagined a little bit more like a genre exercise, like fight scenes, the stuff, like a physical demon. But by the time we got to the end in the park bench, we were like, wow, this has a lot of heart. Like this feels hopeful. This feels like, um, we sort of fell in love with the characters and the relationship and the ending. Um, I've mentioned this in another interview, but I just read oh my gosh, I'm gonna forget the name of it. But there's a Tolstoy book called A Confession, where he talks about in his 50s, he was feeling like he wanted to end his life for about 5 years, even though he was one of the most famous people in the country and had everything that one could possibly need. And he makes a really good argument for nihilism. Really good argument. Like he's like, and it's about that period of his life and then finding his way back to, in his case, faith, family, and like loving life again.
Mm.
But what struck me about it was how dark it gets. And it feels like you really have to go through it in a way that doesn't feel like a kid's movie, so that when you come out the other side, it feels earned, and like something that feels um, like the end of Midnight Mass. It's like almost apocalyptic, but there's still hope in there. And I think that's sort of where we ended up with the movie and what we love about it.
Yeah, like, I didn't expect it to go the way it went at the end. Like
Mm-hmm.
that, definitely you were just like, but with some of those little twists and things like you're just like, oh, that's so like, of course a demon would do that. Oh,
Yeah.
that makes so much sense. And so you're seeing these things, and I think you go to places where I think sometimes people pull back from going all the way there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought that was good. And also when you're talking about like the trauma and stuff that they've gone through, it wasn't just, you know what I mean? Because there's certain tropes that people always go to, and we
Yep.
don't really get into any of it, but we just know they've been through this stuff, but they've been there together and all of that. And so I think the way it's all unfolding, there is this honesty about it. And so that makes it resonate even more, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, thanks, man. I think it was tough. We wanted to make sure we wanted to make sure the characters felt real and like you could understand where they've been through. Um, but I really wrestled with that, like the exploit. I don't know. There's so many great movies that tackle stuff like that, going through a fucked up childhood, and I kind of wanted to focus on where they're at now, because I think that stuff is like there's a lot of bad ways to do it badly.
Mm,
You know what I mean?
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
Um, yeah. Well, thanks. That was the goal, and it feels great. It's like you're saying back stuff that I care about the film, so that feels great.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying what I saw, you know what I mean? And that's the thing. But it's just like, kind of wonder, like you're making this thing that's crazy. What happens at the end of the fucking day of each shoot? Like, is it just like, okay, we need to watch something stupid. We need to watch a and we need some happy music. Like,
Yep.
what do you do?
Yeah, yeah. We each had different ways of dealing with it. Uh, Evan and Libby were living together, almost like brother and sister, and they were both really health conscious. So they would like be really, really healthy and like exercise and like do all this stuff together and drink like green juice, or I don't know what they did, but it worked for them. I had a God, it all sounds so cheesy. I had a book on like a book on Stoicism and a book on Buddhism. I almost said Buddhism and Buddhism that I read in between, and we would also just try to like talk about the day and like laugh a little bit and sort of have like a good send off. I think, what did I watch? I'm sure I watch my dumb YouTube stuff. For me, it's like people building furniture. Uh, you know, they're just like it's like just so relaxing to me. I don't know why. I don't know. Do you have something like that? You know what I mean? Everyone has their YouTube thing they do. Everybody has their thing. Um, uh, so that was mine, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. No, interesting. Interesting. And like, when you're trying to set the mood and everything
Mm-hmm.
like that, do you create playlists, or is it, do you use other things as reference points, or like, yo, read this book, or watch this film, watch this play? Like, is there
Mm-hmm.
something that you kind of put together to help people get into certain mindsets?
Yeah, I forget the list now, but I definitely gave the actors a bunch of movies that were inspiring me in terms of look and and like kind of vibe.
Mm,
But that was mostly for me because I did all the cinematography and art direction and stuff like that. And I think that for the two for the two leads, it was a lot of work, you know, just learning about like trauma and some of the stuff that these and codependency and all this other stuff, just so they didn't, I think when you're playing characters like that, you're like, I got to do this right, man, because like you can't mess around with this stuff. It's really serious and it's people's lives, and it's like people that we know of went through this stuff, so you got to do, like, we really cared about doing it right. um Playlists, what do we listen to? um a little bit. I think mostly I've heard of directors that have like whole mixtapes that they listen to either while they're writing, and I think that's awesome. I would actually like to do that. I think for me it's more like stuff I'm reading at the time. Uh uh yeah. For this one it was Thomas Merton, and there was a few other things. But you just get inspired by the kind of like literature and stuff. But I think like vibing out to music either before scenes or after scenes would be pretty great. I think we do have a little, like, there's one scene on a street at the very end, and that one was pretty scary because it's a big scene, and also it's like shooting at night, and it's like very disruptive. There's like people from Brooklyn wandering around, like, yelling at you sometimes. So it's a very emotional scene. So
yeah,
for that one, we spent some time. We didn't listen to music, but we kind of like sat there and, like, I don't know, like got into the place. Took a while to kind of get into the zone,
right, right.
um, to kind of ramp up to things, so you're not just like getting on set and like starting like a shot. Um, because it's tough to do that as an actor, and like making sure to give them the space to do that. But like, yeah, I mean the vibing out part of it. I guess for the fight sometimes we got kind of like pumped or whatever, but it's mostly like giving the actor space and letting them do what they need to do to get to where where they have to go in a scene, and making sure that if things go badly you can adapt and like hold. Some teams were really upsetting, like the scene, that 20-minute end scene. We did a few takes of that and then we just took a break before we did it again because we were, because that hit home for a lot of us. So it was a little bit different every scene. It's a rambling answer to your question, but I think maybe I just got excited about the idea of vibing out before a scene to music. I'll think about that one.
No, no, it's always intriguing hearing these things, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now it's all done, right? You're out doing your press and everything like that. Like, are you hearing the reactions that you were hoping for? Like, there's, it must be tough because, like, there's often people that be like, I didn't understand where that was going, or
Yep.
this, but people like get it, and you know, you always seen those videos come up and be like, the ending explained of, and you're just like, I thought it was very clear. Why do you need an
Yeah. Yeah.
explanation to the end? What's
Yeah.
going
Yeah, I mean, so far it's been really good. I think it helps to have some films that we'd already made because people that know our previous work kind of know what to expect. Um, I think it's definitely a slow burn. It's definitely not a conventional horror film, and it definitely leans into the psychological. So our sense so far is that people that know what they're getting into, um, it's been really great because I think, it's always, people ask me what the hardest part of all this is. And this is like, it's like, is it fundraising? And I'm like, no, it's this part. It's like when you like have, you like have these nightmares or dreams, and like, then you work with these people to make it. And then you're like, and you just like put it out there, and people are going to react the way they react. And for some people, they're like, I've had that dream too. Holy shit. You know, and they like say back to you all of the stuff that you feel, and it's amazing. And other people are just like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, man. So, um, you know, it's our hope that it finds, you know, we don't want to give anybody a shitty experience. Like, you know, that's not, uh, you know, there's, so, you know, hope so far the people that we've been talking to, like, the best part is when someone feels like they can relate to the experience of the siblings and that it really means something to them. And there was one young woman I was talking to was like, I was that protector for my younger brother. And I know exact like this, and this movie felt like the horror version of what I went through. And
Mm,
that stuff like that is like why you make, that's like what it's about for me. So that matters a lot to me. And yeah, hope that keeps happening.
awesome, awesome. And where do you go from here, man?
Uh there's some larger projects uh that are, you know, I sold a TV show a little bit ago, and that's been exciting.
Ah,
So there's some larger, bigger films in the works. And then there's also the next film that our group is hoping to do, and it's either going to be, we're there's two. There's one set in Ireland because I have an Irish citizenship, and that's where my like family's from. Like a ghost story there, and then another one about two people that stumble upon a cursed play that like asks them to perform it, and it'll like, and then it gets all like, doesn't quite go full Cthulhu, but it has some cosmic horror in there as well. So that one's a little more fun. So we're figuring ourselves out, but it's yeah, excited to be making stuff again. I feel like COVID has put us all, it's like been a long winter, and you know, excited to make stuff again.
mm, well, man, it sounds, yeah, super intriguing. And after this, I'm sure everyone is on bated breath to see what you do next, man. So yeah, how can people keep track of you, man?
So I guess the best way, we have a Twitter, and I guess that's probably the best way. Otherwise, whenIConsumeyou.com has a lot of the updates. I'm not on any social media, for better or worse, but we do have a Twitter, and so anything that comes out will be on there. And all the actors, I believe, have handles, and they sort of put out stuff as well.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Oh, well, superb. Like all the information is on the website, people. So make sure you go check it out, follow, go watch the film because boy, this is something. This really is something, right? Yeah, it's it's kind of intimate, like, but it's also this kind of bigger thing, right? Looking at these psychological and just different emotional triggers and what things kind of create these relationships and these fights that we do on all these different levels. So yeah, it's man, it's gonna have you on the edge of your seat because these twists, like you don't see these twists coming. That was the other great thing. I just did not see some of these things coming, and that was great. So yeah, superb job, man. Superb job.
Awesome, man. Thank you.
Well, yeah, when you've got the next project ready, hey, please come by and let's talk about it, man.
Awesome. Would love to. Thanks so much for having me, man.
Hey, no problem at all. It's been great fun. Thank you very much, Perry. Appreciate it. Peace.